All right. Chapter 7. Stones suspended in the air. All right. The hot hailstones, which at Moses' intercession had remained suspended in the air when they were about to fall upon the Egyptians, were now cast down upon the Canaanites. These words mean that a part of the meteorites of the cometary train of the days of Exodus remained in the celestial sphere for about 50 years, falling in the days of Joshua in the valley of Beth Horon on the same forenoon when the sun and the moon stood still for the length of a full day. The language of the Talmud and Midrash suggests that the same comet returned after some 50 years. Once more, it passed very close to the Earth. This time, it did not reverse the poles of the Earth, but kept the terrestrial axis tilted for a considerable length of time. Again, the world was, in the language of the rabbis, consumed in the whirlwind, and all the kingdoms tottered. The earth quaked and trembled from the noise of thunder. Terrified mankind was decimated once more, and carcasses were like rubbish in the day of anger. On the day when this took place on the earth, the sky was in confusion. Stones fell from the heavens, sun and moon stopped in their paths, and a comet must also have been seen. Habakkuk describes the portent in the sky on that memorable day when, in his words, the sun and moon stood still in their habitation. It had the form of a man on a chariot drawn by horses and was regarded as God's angel. In the King James Version, the passage read, his glory covered the heavens, and his brightness was as the light. He had horns coming out of his hand. Burning coals went forth at his feet. He drove asunder the nations, and the everlasting mountains were scattered. Was thine anger against the rivers? Was thy wrath against the sea? And thou didst ride upon thine horses and thy chariots of salvation. Thou didst cleave the earth with rivers. The mountains saw thee, and they trembled. The overflowing of the water passed by. The deep uttered his voice. The sun and moon stood still in their habitation. At the light of thy arrows they want, and at the shining thy glittering appear. Thou didst march through the land in indignation. Thou didst thresh the heathen in anger. Thou didst walk through the sea with thine horses, through the heap of great waters. Since the texts of the scriptures have, for some psychological reason rooted in the readers, the quality of being easily misread, misunderstood, or misinterpreted, I give also some of the passages of the third chapter Habakkuk in another modernized reading. His splendor over all the sky, his glory filling all the earth, his radiance in a lightning blaze on either side flash rays. At his step, the earth is shaken. At his look, nations are scattered. The ancient hills are shattered. Mountains of old sink low. Art thou wrathful at the sea, thou art storming on the steeds, upon the chariots in triumph. The hills writhe at thy sight. The sun forgets to rise, the moon to move. Before the flashes of thy darting arrows, before the sheen of the lightning, thy lance, thou trampest earth in fury. Thou art threshing the peoples in thine anger. With the earth disturbed in its spinning on its axis, the mechanical friction of displaced strata and magma must have set the world on fire. The world burned. The Greek story of Pantheon will be introduced here because of the interpretation heard by Solon during his visit to Egypt. All right, 7-2. Pantheon. The Greeks, as well as the Carians and other peoples on the shores of the Aegean Sea, told of a time when the sun was driven off its course and disappeared for an entire day, and the earth was burned and drowned. The Greek legend says that the young Phaethon, who claim patronage of the sun, on that fatal day tried to drive the chariot of the sun. Phaethon was unable to make his way against the whirling poles, and their swift axes swept him away. Phaethon in Greek means the blazing one. Many authors have dealt with the story of Phaethon. The best known version is a creation of the Latin poet Ovid. The chariot of the sun, driven by Phaethon, moved no longer in the same course as before. The horses break loose from their course and rush aimlessly, knocking against the stars set deep in the sky and snatching the chariot along through uncharted ways. The constellations of the cold bears tried to plunge into the forbidden sea, and the sun's chariot roamed through unknown regions of the air. It was borne along just as a ship driven before the headlong blast whose pilot has yet ah damn whose pilot has let the useless rudder go and abandoned the ship to the gods and prayers. The earth bursts into flame, the highest parts first, and splits into deep cracks, and its moisture is all dried up. The meadows are burned to white ashes, the trees are consumed, green leaves and all, and the ripe grain furnishes fuel for its own destruction. Great cities perish with their walls, and the vast conflagration reduces whole nations to ashes. The woods are ablaze with the mountains. Etna is blazing boundlessly, and twin-peaked Parnassus. I said it. Nor does its chilling climb save Scythia. Caucasus burns, and the heaven-piercing Alps and cloud-capped Apennines. The scorched clouds belched forth smoke. Phaethon sees the earth aflame. He can no longer bear the ashes and whirling sparks and is completely shrouded in the dense, hot smoke. In this pitchy darkness, he cannot tell where he is or whither he is going. It was then, as men think, that the peoples of Ethiopia became black-skinned, since the blood was drawn to the surface of their bodies by the heat. Then also Libya became a desert, for the heat dried up her moisture. The Don's waters steam, Babylonian Euphrates burns, the Ganges, Phasis, Danube, Alphus boil, Spercheios banks are aflame. The golden sands of Tagus melt in the intense heat, and the swans are scorched. The Nile fled in terror to the ends of the earth. The 7 mouths lie empty, filled with dust, 7 broad channels, all without a stream. The same mischance dries up the Thracian rivers, Herbus and Strymon. Also the rivers of the west, the Rhine, Rhone, Po, and Tiber. Great cracks yawn everywhere. Even the sea shrinks up, and what was but now a great watery expanse is a dry plain of sand. The mountains which the deep sea had covered before the spring forth and increased the number of the scattered Cyclades. How could the poets have known that a change in the movement of the sun across the firmament must cause a world conflagration? Blazing of volcanoes, boiling of rivers, disappearance of seas, birth of deserts, emergence of islands, if the sun never changed its harmonious journey from sunrise to sunset. The disturbance in the movement of the sun was followed by a period as long as a day when the sun did not appear at all. Ovid continues, if we are to believe report, 1 whole day went without the sun, but the burning world gave light. A prolonged night in one part of the world must be accompanied by a prolonged day in another part. In Ovid, we see the phenomenon related in the book of Joshua, but from another longitude. This may stimulate surmise as to the geographical origin of the Indo-Iranian or Carian migrants to Greece. The globe changed the inclination of its axis, longitudes change too. Ovid ends the description of the world catastrophe contained in the story of Phaethon, causing all things to shake with her mighty trembling. The earth, she sank back a little lower than her wonted place. Plato recorded the story heard 2 generations before. Solon, the wise ruler in Athens. Solon, on his visit to Egypt, questioned the priest versed in the lore of antiquity on early history. He discovered that neither he himself nor any other Greek knew anything at all, one might say, about such matters. Solon unfolded before the priest the tale of the deluge, the only ancient tradition he was aware of. One of the priests, an old man, said, there have been, and there will be, many and divers destructions of mankind, of which the greatest are by fire and water, and lesser ones by countless other means. For in the truth, the story that is told in your country as well as ours, how once upon the time Phaethon, son of Helios, yoked his father's chariot, and because he was unable to drive it along the course taken by his father, burnt up all that was upon the earth, and himself perished by a thunderbolt. That story, as it is told, has the fashion of a legend, but the truth of it lies in the occurrence of a shifting of the bodies in the heavens which moved around the earth, and a destruction of the things on the earth by fierce fire, which recurs at long intervals. The Egyptian priest explained to Solon that in these catastrophes the literary works of many peoples and their learned men perished. For that reason, the Greeks were still childish, as they no longer knew the true horrors of the past. These words of the priest were only an introduction to a revelation of his knowledge about the lands that were erased when Greece also and the entire world were visited with heavenly wrath. He told the story of a mighty kingdom on a great island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean that submerged and sank forever into the waters. All right.